probably maybe the only time that this has ever kicked off a Sunday sermon. But have you ever thought about aliens? Anybody ever thought about aliens? I don't know if you have, but there are times where I'm wondering about it. I know they did a mission to Mars just a few years ago, and they think they found some kind of life on Mars, but it's very, very different than what we see in movies. It's more organic, plant life type of things. But this world really is fascinated by aliens, and there's all kinds of movies, World War Z and Invasion of the Body Snatchers, some of the old ones. I can't think of all the names, but our world really has a fascination with aliens, and one of they usually have one of two perspectives. They either think that aliens are going to come and destroy planet Earth. You know, it's that scene in the movie where you're walking through the streets and all of a sudden there's this big shadow. This big, and everybody looks up, and there's a spaceship that's above them, and they know that these aliens are going to come and they're going to destroy planet Earth, and that's the end of life. And then the other perspective is that aliens will come to planet Earth and they'll live with humans, and they'll learn from humans, and they'll try to learn everything they can and walk just amongst them unbeknownst to them. The movie, the TV show that was on a couple years ago, there's a new TV show called The Neighbors, and it's this kind of idea where aliens are living with human beings. Just an incredibly creative concept. I think one of the things about people with regards to aliens is that it's fun to imagine what it could look like. It's the unknown, and it allows our imaginations to go wild. We don't know whether or not there's any kind of life form out there, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not going to be preaching on aliens all morning, and this is the introduction. But it gets our imagination going, and we begin to think about what it could look like. What could an alien look like? Because we don't have nothing concrete to think about. And so our imaginations begin to get going, and some of us think that if there's aliens out there, that they are these gross, grotesque creatures that look like a reptile that on steroids, that they're got all kinds of slime coming from the mouth, and we begin to think of the very negative. Some of us think that they're these cuddly things like Elf. Anybody remember Elf? You know, these cuddly little things are E.T., phone home, that type of thing. This cute little creature that everybody loves and embraces, or maybe they're human beings. Maybe there are aliens right now in the midst of us. Just look at somebody beside you. No, I'm just joking. But our imaginations begin to run wild because we don't know. We don't know, and so we begin to create things in our minds that are either based upon our desires or our fears, and we come up with concepts. Do you know the same thing is true with God? Because we haven't physically seen God, for years humans have been coming up with all kinds of concepts of what he looks like. They use their imaginations in the same way we imagine aliens. They use their imaginations to come up with a concept of what God looks like. Some of us have an image of God in our minds where he is this grumpy old man. He's sitting up in heaven on the throne, and he's just looking down on earth, and he's grumpy. He's just waiting for one of you to do something wrong. Grumpy, look at that. Look at the way they're sitting today. Look how messed up their clothes are. How come their hair's not done in a different way? And we have this image of God as this grumpy old man. And some of us see him as this cosmic killjoy, that he's just kind of walking alongside, and every time we start to enjoy life, he's like, I can't believe you're enjoying life. Just standing there with this school teacher look on his face, ready to slap our wrist because we're enjoying life, this cosmic killjoy. Some of us see him as this go happy, go lucky type of person. He just wants to hug everybody and sing Kumbaya. You know, let's just get together and just have this warm feeling, this warm time together. Let's just enjoy life. Some of us see God as a Santa Claus. We just come to him and we give him a little wish list, and he's like, I got to figure out how to make all this happen. They asked for this and this and this and this morning, and so I've got to meet these needs. Got all kinds of images in our minds of what God looks like. And God's known that. He's known that when humans are left to their own devices, when they're left to their own imaginations, they will come up with concepts that are based upon their own desires or based upon their own fears that will create an image of God that's very different from who he is. And so, about 2,000 years ago, he said, enough's enough. I don't want humanity to have an improper perspective of who I am. I actually want to reveal myself so they see the real me. so they see what I'm really like. I'm tired of their misconstrued ideas of what God is like. And so I've got to come up with a plan to actually show myself in an incredible way to humanity. And the Bible tells us that the way he formulated this plan was he decided to send his son, Jesus Christ. And I want to show you this morning just one verse. We're going to just preach from one verse this morning, but I want to just show you something so unique about his plan. Look at John chapter 1, verse 14. I'll give you just a second to turn there. John chapter 1, verse 14 says this, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We've seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." Let me read it one more time. "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." And if you just look up at the screen, this is Eugene Peterson's translation of this verse in the Message. He says, "The Word became flesh and blood, and he moved into the neighborhood." And I've highlighted this word, this phrase, "moved into the neighborhood," because it's going to be the essence of our talk this morning. But God moved into the neighborhood. Can I just get that verse back up on the screen again, Deb? And then it says, "We saw the glory of our own eyes, the one of a kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous inside and out, true from start to finish." God says, hey, I want humanity to actually know what I'm like. I don't want them to be left to their own imaginations the way they would be with aliens, with all kinds of unknowns. I want them to know who I am, and so I've got to come up with a plan to reveal myself to them so they see the true God. And the Bible tells us that he sends Jesus into the neighborhood. Into the neighborhood. I love this. John starts off, John chapter 1, he begins to talk about Jesus as the Word. This word logos, you've probably heard it preached from many, many pulpits. The word logos is this idea of concepts or ideas. It's not about the letters that are formulated to come up with a word. It's not about guttural sounds that come from our voice. It's about the idea or the concept. And when John uses the word logos to describe Jesus, he's saying that Jesus is the very concept, the very idea of who God is. He uses this in such an intentional way. He says, I want you to see the idea of God. I want you to see the concept of God. I want you to see the Logos, which is in Jesus Christ. And so the Father says, I want to reveal myself to humanity, and he sends the Logos down to dwell in the neighborhood, to dwell in the neighborhood. Now listen, I know that the ultimate mission of Jesus was to go to the cross, but I want you to also know that that wasn't his only mission. The mission of Jesus wasn't just to go to the cross. The mission of Jesus was also to reveal the Father to humanity. He wanted the people to see what God was like. This verse tells us about that. This is the moment where God says, hey, I'm about to reveal myself to humanity. I want them to see who I am, and I'm going to do it through Jesus Christ. And so Jesus steps into the neighborhood to reveal God. Now, friends, in the 21st century, we don't have Jesus walking through our neighborhoods. We don't have Jesus walking through our church in a physical form. Jesus isn't sitting in some pew wearing some white robe with a blue sash and having a beard that's better than Pastor Adam's. It's Duck Dynasty days. We don't have that. We don't have that. What we have is you. What we have is me. We are called into the neighborhood to reveal Jesus to humanity. And if we're going to do that, we've been talking about Love the City campaign. If we're going to reveal Jesus, we're going to reveal God in the neighborhood, we've got to actually see what Jesus did to reveal God. So let's look at John chapter 1, verse 14. The very first thing that we see in this is that Jesus shows us that we need to be human. And I know this sounds like such a trivial idea, be human. Pastor, I'm human. I'm flesh and blood. That's easy for me. I came in this world human. I'm not anything else. But let me just take it a little bit further. The Bible says the Word became flesh. God Almighty, the creator of the universe, the one who has always been, who always will be, became flesh. I mean, it's so mysterious. We can talk about it. We can preach about it. We can read books about it. But it's such a mystery to our minds that the God who's uncontainable would allow himself to be limited by human flesh. But the Bible says that the Word, Jesus Christ, the Logos, the very concept of God became flesh. He took on humanity. Friends, listen to this. God Almighty, the one who created the universe, the one who holds your breath, He stepped into human flesh, and he experienced tiredness. He knew what it was like at the end of a day to go, man, I am so tired. Anybody ever been there? You work so hard, nobody's been tired before. Okay, just me. Tired. I just need to sit down. I've been preaching all day. God became tired. Jesus takes on human flesh, and he experiences anger. There are moments where he's incredibly angry with people. There are moments where he's lonely. He's left alone in the garden praying by himself. There are moments where he knows what it feels like to be rejected by those who are closest to him, people who've let him down. He knows what it's like to be rejected by people of society, where people are so against him that they're willing to step up and put him on a cross. He knows what it's like to face the critics. He knows what it's like to be walking along and all of a sudden feel rumblings in his stomach. He's hungry. He knows what it's like to love. He knows what it's like to feel peace. He knows what it's like to feel turmoil. He knows the things that we know because the Bible says that the Word became flesh. He became a human, and he identified with everything that we're going through. Friends, let me tell you something. As Christians who are called to reveal God, we've got to make sure that we live as humans like Jesus did. You say, I don't understand what you mean. Well, let me explain. There are too many times that the church world thinks that they need to live above humanity, that we need to put on a plastic form of Christianity, that we need to put on a facade, that we can't be real, that we can't talk about our tiredness, that we can't talk about our frustrations, that we can't talk about our loneliness or our disappointments. We think we've got to have our act together. All of a sudden, there are non-Christians around us like, oh, I've got to get on my saintliness. I better fix things up, get that button done up, and I better get my jacket back on because I've got to turn into super Christian now, and I've got to be, I can't be real. You know, I don't have a tie on. I better put that on and make sure that I look pretty good because that person needs to know that I've got my act together because I'm a Christian. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Oh, yes. Yes, you've been going through some trials? No, I've got victory in Jesus. He's my strength, and oh, yes, hallelujah. Everything's going to be fine. And we go through life, and people say, hey, I'm sorry about your loss. No. The peace of God passes all understanding. Everything's fine. He'll be with me. Everything's wonderful. Are you going through trouble? No. This is just the mountain that I need to get over. Everything will be fine. Everything's good. I walk with Jesus. He's my strength. He lives within me. Everything's wonderful. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. And so many times we step into the saintly mode where we are anything less than human. We pretend and we put on facades like we've got to get our act together. Friends, I want you to know that Jesus was frustrated. He was disappointed. He faced moments that were incredibly authentic, and this world needs to see that of you. They don't need to see the plastic fake Christian. You don't need to have your act together. Turn to somebody and say that. You don't need to have your act together. Some of you just turned to somebody and said, you don't have your act together. Hey, listen, I know this sounds so simple, but I've watched it in church worlds where people walk around quoting scriptures and denying reality. We need to be human. There are moments Jesus has said, hey guys, I just want to be left alone. There are moments where he is frustrated. There are moments where he's flipping tables. I mean, you want to talk about a human Jesus? I mean, he shows up at the temple and he starts flipping tables. I'd love to do that. Have my frustrating pastoral moment and just start flipping pews. I'm just so frustrated right now, just flipping pews. Everybody's going, what's Pastor Jeff's problem? Well, he's just human. He's just human. He's just human. He comes up to people who are living two-faced lives and he rebukes them. He's like, oh, they'll come along. No, he's angry. He's ticked off with them. He's the real human being. He shows up to parties. Oh my goodness. Are you serious, Pastor? Yeah, he's invited to the weddings. He's invited to the parties. He's showing up where most Christians won't go. We'll talk about that in a few moments. He's incredibly human. He asks for time alone. He sleeps when everybody else is awake. Friends, the Word became flesh. to tell humanity that God identifies with them. And we need to be human, authentic to this world so that we can identify with what they're going through so that we have an opportunity to share Christ with them. I picked up a book a couple weeks ago, and I love books. I absolutely love reading, and this book, I start to read it. It's by this author named Scott Wilson. He's a friend of my friend, Wayne Northup. He pastors a church in Dallas called The Oaks. Took over from his father. The church had been fluctuating between 600 and 900 people. Went 5 times, going from 600 to 900 people. And he got frustrated, and I won't tell you the whole journey, but ended up growing this church to a few thousand people, doing an incredible job. And so I picked up his book, thought I'll learn some more leadership principles. I'm just a few pages in. And I wish I could explain what took place as I was reading this passage. But as I'm reading it, all of a sudden, it was more than my head engaged. All of a sudden, my heart got engaged with what he's sharing. Because this is what he says. He says, as a lead pastor, there are days where I walk into my office and I don't have a clue what to do. And I went, oh, that's the way I feel on Mondays. And he says it's not about a lack of vision. It's about having too much vision. It's about having too many things going through your head. And that's what I face constantly. I come into the office and I go, I want to do this, 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 I want to do this. And then I sit back and I go, where do I go? Where do I start? And I begin to read what he's going through, and he becomes so honest and so human. And it was like it ministered more than to my head, it ministered to my heart. And I remember at that moment as I read it, I thought, I want to read the rest of what you have to say, because you're not just this leader who's untouchable. You're facing the same things I'm facing. You're feeling the same things I'm feeling. You're going through the same things I'm going through. And he talks about moments where he's frustrated, moments where things go bad and things go good. And I go, I can relate to those. I want to read more. Friends, I want to tell you that our humanity allows us permission into people's lives as we begin to expose ourselves as human beings who don't have our acts completely together. People will look at us and go, I'm willing to listen to your message. I'm willing to find out about your God. When we pretend that we have everything together, we do not relate to the people around us. I'm not talking about airing our laundry. I'm talking about being real. There are moments that I come to church and I'm not super excited. Whoa. It's either are you, I know it, I see it on your faces. But we walk in and how you do, oh, glory to God, so good to be in the house of God. And you're lying, and so am I. The Word became flesh. He became human. He needed to declare who God was, and he wanted to say that God is a God who understands what we're going through. And friends, as we begin to reach out to people, we have got to come as human beings, not super spiritual beings, but human beings who have the same junk in our lives, who have fights with our wives, who don't know what to do with our kids sometimes, who have financial pressures, who have disappointments, who have fears, who have all kinds of stuff going on, but we serve a God who walks with us through it. He becomes human. He becomes human. His humanity says that God is a God who understands. Secondly, the Bible doesn't just say that he became flesh. It says, and he made his dwelling among us. If we're going to reach people, we've got to dwell with them. God moved into the neighborhood. Listen to this. God could have easily become a commuter. And some of you know what I'm talking about. You live in Orleans, but you take the bus into downtown Ottawa, or you take the bus into the east or the west side of Ottawa. You commute to some other neighborhood. God could have done that. He could have said, you know what, I like it up here in heaven. I've got a nice home. I've got a nice family. The angels are looking after me very well. And so, you know what, I'm going to commute down to earth and just kind of preach the gospel, and at the end of the day, I'll go back to heaven. I'll just commute. But he doesn't do that. He says, I want to dwell with humanity. I want to be in their neighborhood. I want to be the neighbor to somebody. I want to sit down and dwell with them. And so Jesus becomes the neighbor. He becomes the neighbor of humanity. He goes to a wedding where there's lots of alcohol. He sits at a well with an immoral woman. He has dinner with tax collectors. He has conversations with criminals on a cross. And in Luke 15:2, the Bible says that all the tax collectors and sinners come around him. He's dwelling with them. Friends, he's dwelling with them. He's not just dwelling, he's not looking around going, I just need to find some righteous people. I need to find some holy people. I need to get a small group full of the best of the best of the elite of the spiritual forces out there. He begins to dwell with people who don't have their acts together. He dwells with them. He becomes their neighbor. Sitting down beside the immoral person, that person who's got all kinds of junk in their life. He dwells with them. The one who everybody else in society despises, the one that the church hates, he dwells with them. The ones that cause people to clench their teeth, they can't even talk about the stuff that they do, he dwells with them. The one who's got all kinds of messed up stuff in their home life, things that are so public that it would make great news for the National Enquirer, he dwells with them. People who've got junk inside the recesses of their heart that's so private and they look so good on the outside, but they're not. He dwells with them. And in Luke chapter 15, the Pharisees, the religious people, the church people, they see Jesus with the tax collectors. They see him with the sinners, and they turn and they say to themselves, can you see this guy? Can you see this Jesus? Can you see that he is hanging out with the lowliest of the lowlies? Can you see that he's dwelling with sinners? Can you see where he's dwelling? And Jesus goes on and he responds to them by doing this. There was a man who had 99 sheep, and one of them got lost. There was a woman who had some coins, and she lost one of them. There was a man who had 2 sons, and one of them took all his inheritance and he spent it foolishly. And he begins to tell these 3 stories of people who are lost. And he's making a point that God doesn't look to dwell just with the people who've got their acts together, but he looks to dwell with those who are lost. Friends, let me say this as kindly as I can. The church has created its own spiritual ghettos. Groups of people who look and sound exactly like us. And we've stopped dwelling with the world and we dwell simply with us. That doesn't look at all like Jesus. Some of you would have a hard time dwelling with a homosexual. Some of you would have a hard time dwelling with an adulteress. Some of you would have a hard time dwelling with somebody who gets drunk constantly. Some of you, every time someone swears, you pull away from them because you have a hard time dwelling with them. Some of you have a hard time dwelling with somebody who's a cheat and a liar. And yet that seems to be the place where Jesus goes the most. The lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son. He doesn't just show up and preach the gospel. He sits down with them. He has meals with them. He has conversations with them. He makes them feel special. He earns the right to have the conversation with them. He draws close and he shows them the presence and the proximity of his God, the God who he is. The presence and the proximity of God. I remember being a teenager, and you've heard me talk about this, I shared it last night with the young adults, about the day that God awakened my heart and I went after him with everything and just pursuing who he was. I wish I had somebody sensible in my life who could have given me some direction, because I was a pretty decent athlete in high school. I was one of the best long-distance runners. It's so interesting seeing that type of thing in your kids. You see your own skills in your kids. I watched all 3 of my kids do incredibly well in long-distance running. And I was a great long-distance runner. But I chose not to join the cross-country team because I was too busy with church. I was too busy going to the youth service and the prayer meeting and helping out with kids' church and helping the seniors ministries. I was involved in everything. I was a pretty decent soccer player. And I had people say, why don't you join the soccer team? I can't, I'm too busy. I got youth group. I've got this, I got this at church, I got this at church. I had all these opportunities to be involved in school with those who needed Christ. I had all these opportunities to dwell with them. But somebody told me in my teenage years that if you're truly on fire for God, you'll always be at church. You'll always be there when the church doors are open. You'll show up for every single program and get involved in everything that there is. And I left them, the people that Jesus would dwell with, and I would go with them, the people that were criticizing Jesus for dwelling with them. And I would stay over here and I would spend all my time with the Christians and spend all this time. And I looked over at the end of my high school years and I realized that that dark place where all of them were was still dark because the light was over here. The light was over here. You see, unless the light goes to the dark places and dwells with the dark places, it will always be dark. It will always be dark. I heard this story this week of Colleen Norton. She's a single mom. Three young teenage girls. Or I don't know if they're teenagers. 3 girls, though, for sure. 2008. She begins to get the heart of God to dwell amongst those who need him. And so she puts this advertisement on Craigslist. She advertises a free Christmas dinner. And in her advertisement, she says, a free Christmas dinner. And at the beginning, she says, are you hurting or facing hard times? Are you lonely? And she says, if you are, I'd like to invite you to this Christmas dinner at my house. She doesn't wait for the church to do it. She doesn't just gather Christian friends together for a dinner. She puts it out there publicly. Oh, pastor, but you don't know who you're going to get. You could get some psychotic murderer. Yeah, you probably could. But she does this, and she opens the doors to her home and invites people who are out there to dwell with her on Christmas Day and to have a meal. And when she was interviewed and said, why'd you do this? She says, I wanted to show my 3 girls what Jesus was like. That he's willing to dwell with those who need him. People who are lonely, people who are facing hard times, people who are going through difficulties. I wanted to show them what Jesus was like. Most Christians would have just gathered their Christian friends and put the dinner together, but she chose to do something that pushed her out of her comfort zone, to dwell with those who nobody else is dwelling with. The Bible tells us in the very next line, we have seen his glory. We've seen his glory. He dwelt amongst us. He moved into the neighborhood. We've seen his glory. Let me tell you something. You can't see the glory of God unless you're up close. And he chose to dwell amongst unsaved people, those who were so messed up, because he actually was trying to reveal the glory of God. You can't see God's glory from a distance. You've got to get up close. And listen to me, friends. People will never see the glory of God inside of you from a distance. They've got to see you up close. When I was interviewed, I don't know if I've shared this. When I was interviewed for this church, those of you who were part of the interview process, you'll remember. I said this line. I said, this church will benefit more from a senior pastor who coaches soccer during the summer than runs a Bible study. And some may agree, some may not, but I said, unless I model what it means to dwell amongst people, then the church will never dwell amongst people. If I simply go and do what we've always done and formulate Christian ghettos, that's people just like us, then we will never, ever make an impact upon the world. Jesus, listen please, this is not Jeff Hillier. This isn't some latest fad. Jesus dwelt amongst them. Jesus dwelt amongst them. He showed the glory of God by dwelling amongst people who needed to see the glory of God. The lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son. And if we're going to make an impact upon this world, we've got to dwell amongst people, just like Jesus did. Thirdly, not only are we to be human, not only are we to dwell with people, but friends, we're to go to them. Go to them. It says this, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father. In the Greek, there's a word, and it's monogenes. I'm probably saying it wrong, and I know Linda Wood will ask me how to spell it on Monday. But monogenes, M-O-N-O-G-E-N-E-S. There you go. Monogenes. And it means one of a kind, sent from God. Now the Jehovah's Witnesses think that this shows that Jesus was created. That he's not God, that he was a created individual, that Jesus was created by the Father, and that makes him substandard to who God is. It's an inaccurate translation of this word. Everybody needs to hear that. Jesus is fully God. He's fully God. The Father is fully God, the Holy Spirit is fully God, and Jesus is fully God. Because he took on human flesh, it did not demean his godhood. He is still God. What the Bible is saying, what John is saying, is that Jesus becomes the one-of-a-kind extension of who God is. The one-of-a-kind, the only one, the unique one, the one that comes from who he is, the extension of God. The monogenes, the extension of God. And in that simple verse, we can get so caught up on the idea that he is God's son that we miss the mission that's actually being revealed here from God. From God, the one of a kind from God. What it's saying is this, is that the Father has sent the Son. The Father has sent the Son into the world to reveal himself. And then what does Jesus say when he's on planet Earth? It would be better that I go so that the who would come? The Holy Spirit. The Father sends the Son sends the Spirit. And then Acts chapter 2, the Spirit sends us. God is ascending God. He's ascending God. He doesn't say, hey, I'm up here in heaven, and if you want to find me, come looking for me. I'm going to put on a big show, and then maybe you'll come to my heavenly show, and you'll find out who I am. No, God initiates the Son, the one and only from him. He initiates. He sends the Son. The Son initiates. He sends the Spirit into the world. The Spirit initiates. He sends the power into his church so the church can go out and make a difference in humanity. God's always the sending God. He's always the initiator. He's always the one who starts it off. Now, friends, listen, because this is a radical shift that's taking place in the church in the 21st century. In the 1980s, it was really easy to fill churches. It was so, I mean, if you weren't growing in the 1980s, then there was something wrong with what you're doing. Because in the 1980s, we had what they called attractional church. If you put on a good event, if you had a good preacher, if you had good music, if you had good lights, if you had a good program, people would come. It was incredible. You put something on your sign. We've got such and such group here today, and people would drive by and go, I ain't going to go to that. And they would be attracted to these programs and to these messages and to all these things that would draw them into the church. But that wasn't the way Jesus did it. He didn't try to attract people. He went to them. God initiated. He went to them. And so what's happened in the 21st century as we've gotten into the year 2000, 2010, 2013, where we're at today, is the church world has realized that people are no longer attracted to our events. They're not. We can put on all kinds of things on our sign, and people aren't attracted to that. People are not, this is so profound. People are not driving by our sign going, I wonder what they've got on that. I wonder what's happening. I really need Jesus. They're not being attracted to our stuff. I'll never forget how profound of a moment this was. It came to me a moment in my life where I was coaching. It was a Sunday morning that had precipitated by a conversation a week beforehand. I was sitting at an indoor soccer game, and the first few games of soccer, Brock was unable to be there because they were on Sunday mornings. So it was a Saturday morning game, and his coach saw Brock play, and Brock was just a little terror when he was young. He's still a great soccer player, but he was just a terror in Port Hope, just winning everything. And the coach saw him play and he came up to me and he said, Jeff, it'd be great to have Brock here every week. I said, yeah, the first few days have been on Sunday, so we haven't been able to come, but as long as it's on Saturday, everything's fine. And he's like, oh, are you going to be here next week? I said, it's on Saturday, right? He said, yeah. He says, in fact, I'm not here next week. I'm going to be away for such and such. Could you coach the team? And I said, yeah, that should be fine. And so planning on it, get to the Saturday, look at our schedule, realize that the game's not on. It's on Sunday. And I think to myself, well, I'm not going to be able to go to the game. Sunday morning, we've got everybody in the car, and just as we're walking out the door, Ainsley says to me, hey, Jeff, did you check the messages? There was a message from John, who's the coach. And so I went in and checked, and John says, hey, Jeff, thanks so much for coaching this weekend. The game's actually on Sunday. I'm going to be away, and so I so appreciate you doing this. Sunday morning, I'm ready for church. The minister, the pastor, the Christian. Get my jacket on, get my tie on. Do I keep my word or do I go to church? I went out to the car and I said, hey guys, listen, you know that we make church a priority. You know that God is first in our life. But I made a promise to Brock's coach last week and there's some miscommunication. So we're going to miss church this morning. I got to go coach. And so regardless of what you think, that's what I did. And I felt very fine with doing it, that I was honoring my word that morning. I showed up at the gym and we played soccer, and it was a great opportunity for me just to love on the kids and to just connect with the parents. After we were done, it was about 11:30, and we went over to the Coburg Mall. And I remember I was walking through Zellers, and as we had drove into the Coburg Mall, I had seen the sign on the church in Coburg, and it was advertising something. And it just kind of got in the back burner of my mind. And as I was going through the mall, I began to walk around, and I saw people who would choose to be in Zellers on a Sunday morning rather than going to church. This was their habit. This is what they did every Sunday. Well, we come to church, this is where they are. They're in the malls. They're in the coffee shops. They're choosing other places but here. And it hit me that every Sunday, many of these people would be in this store. And I thought to myself, but don't they see the sign? Don't they know about the preacher in that church? Don't they know about the music? Don't they know about the programs? And it hit me, they don't care. Friends, they don't care. They're not going to be attracted to that stuff. They're not. They just keep driving by the signs. They just keep driving by the building. They just keep driving by because we no longer live in a culture that causes people to be attracted to what we offer. That was never part of God's plan in the first place. His plan was always that we would go. His plan was always that the church would not be this. The church would be that out there. This is not the church. You are the church. We use the wrong language. We say we come to church. No, the church comes to a building. We are called to go. The Father sends Jesus. Jesus sends the Spirit sends the Son. Friends, we've got to understand that there are people out there who we don't have relationships with that we must go to. We must begin to have relationships with strangers and people that we know very, very poorly, people in our neighborhoods that we don't even know their name. We've got to go to them because they're not going to just someday see our sign and go, I think I'm going to go in there. That was never part of God's mission. His mission was always to send, to send, to send. How do I know? The Bible says that while we were yet sinners, Jesus Christ was sent. He was sent for us. Friends, you didn't get attracted to Jesus. He didn't stay in heaven and you came knocking on his door saying, hey, could you die for me? Hey, I need what you have. I think heaven's a pretty good place. You guys got nice lights and streets of gold. Could I have that? No, he said, you know what? They're never going to come to me. I've got to initiate it. I've got to initiate. There's a world out there who needs me. And he says, I need to go to them. While we had our fist in God's face, while we were living in sin, while our backs were turned on God, God initiated and he went. He went. Friends, I'm just telling you, and you've heard me say it all fall, and I don't apologize for preaching it over and over again. God has called you to go, to go, to go. The greatest moments that you will experience in God won't happen in this place. Will happen as God in you dwells out there. As you go and you begin to talk to people. As you go and begin to have conversations. You remember last week we talked about blessing. My son said to me, he said, Dad, we're driving home on Sunday. He says, Dad, so what are you doing this week to bless people? I said, I don't know. I'll figure it out. Well, I'm going to call you and hold you accountable. I wanted to smack him. Yeah. It's the human part. I said, well, what are you doing? I got no money. College student. So we talked about that. Anyway, so now I've got my son holding me accountable. So Monday we had our family over. So Tuesday, now it's real life. And I'm driving around, go to the gym, and end up at Tim Hortons. And I think to myself, I just preached on blessing. So I thought, I'm going to bless whoever's behind me. So I determined that in my heart, it's time to bless because Bailey's going to hold me accountable. I look in my rearview window and it's a lady. And I think, oh my goodness, this is going to send an interesting message to the lady at the window. I want to pay for the lady behind me, right? And so I come up to the window and I said, hey ma'am, I want to pay for the car behind me. I said, has the order gone through? And she said, no, it's going through right now. I said, okay, I'll wait. I'll pay for mine and for whoever's behind me. So the order goes through. She said, I ordered like a coffee and a donut. And she says, it's $8. What did she order? I said, okay, I'll pay for that. I'll pay for that. She looked at me and she said, did she do something for you? I said, no, ma'am. I said, would you just tell her that somebody wanted to bless her? That's all I said. Paid, and I got out of there as quickly as possible because I didn't want her tracking me down and going, you trying to hit on me? You know, I didn't know what was going to be said. But friends, listen, I mean, the person didn't get saved. I don't know. Maybe she was drinking her Tim Horton coffee and the Spirit of God came upon her and she started speaking in tongues and gave her life to Christ. I don't know. But most likely, it didn't happen, but I just went. I just did one thing, just go. I don't know, I'm a stranger. I just create opportunities. I go. I try to find moments that with people that I don't even know just to bless, just to communicate Jesus Christ. We go, we go, we go. Father sends the Son sends the Spirit sends the church. He's calling you to go. Jesus goes. We must go to say that God is the great initiator. Lastly, We must present the complete God. Look at this. This is one of my favorite parts of the verse. God in the neighborhood, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. Full of grace and truth. Jesus came in grace and truth. The reason why he came in grace and truth is because God is a God of grace and truth. God is not just a God of grace. You need to hear that. Everybody needs to hear that. God is not just a God of grace. We don't just preach grace. He's also not just a God of truth. He's a God of grace and truth. If all you do is preach grace, you'll end up with narcissism. Oh, it's okay. God's just a God of grace. Don't worry about your sin. We're all sinners. Everything's fine. All right, I'll just keep feeding my flesh. That's not God. But then if we preach nothing but truth, that's not God either. This is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is wrong. No, Jesus comes and he says, I want to share the message of grace and truth. This is who God is. He's a God of grace and truth. Friends, I need to tell you something. As we're out there being the humans, as we're dwelling with people, as we're going to them, there comes a point where we've actually got to open our mouth. But the problem is so many of us don't know what to say next. We don't know whether or not we should champion grace or we should champion truth. But I want to tell you something. We need to champion both, because that is who God is. There's a story where Jesus is sitting, or he's in the temple and he's teaching. He's doing exactly what I'm doing right now. And he's coming to the end of his message. He must have just slipped out in the outside of the temple because he's sitting down by the dirt. And all these religious people come and they bring this woman and they throw her down before Jesus. And the senior pastor of the group, he's got this rock in his hand. And he says, hey, I want to tell you something, Jesus. The woman who's right there, she's an adulteress. She was caught sleeping with another man. And we all know what adultery is. And so, Jesus, we want to tell you that the law, Moses told us that if we catch someone in adultery, we're supposed to stone her. And he's holding stones, and there are people all around who've got these stones that are ready to stone this lady because these stones represent truth. He wasn't inaccurate. That's what Moses did say. That's what the law did say. They got these stones, truth. The problem is all they got is truth. They have no grace. And they're standing there with these stones ready to stone the woman who has the sin. She's the one in adultery. But she represents every person who struggles with homosexuality. She represents every person who struggles with alcohol. She represents every person who struggles with food, who eats way too much. She struggles with every person who's proud. She represents every person who struggles with anger. She represents every person who struggles with greed. She represents every single one of us. All of us who are full of sin. And these men are standing there and they're saying, Jesus, what should we do with her? And they got the stones in their hand, and the stones represent truth. And they say, we know the truth would say that we should stone her. And Jesus kind of just starts writing in the sand. And he looks up and he says, hey, those of you who are without sin, you start the tossing. You throw the first pitch. You who've got your acts completely together and have never sinned, you throw the first pitch. You truth people, throw the first pitch. What? You think he doesn't want to champion truth? No, he does. But the first person who's without sin, just toss the first stone. One by one. You hear the sounding of the dropping of truth. Not the truth falls to the ground, but the one-sidedness does. And one by one they walk away because they know that they got junk in their heart. They know they got pride, they got lust, they got greed, they got anger, they got malice, they got unforgiveness, they got bitterness, they got things that nobody else sees. They just see her sin. Now this lady's before them and all the stones are laying around. And this lady's looking at Jesus, waiting for the verdict, and he says, where are those who were here to condemn you? Where are those with stones? Where are those with truth in their hands? And she says, they're all gone. And he says these words, then neither do I take the stone of truth and become a one-sided God. Neither do I condemn you. But go and sin no more. A moment of grace and truth. He doesn't let her off and go, hey, listen, I'm not going to condemn you. Go and have a good time with whoever you're with right now. But he demonstrates who God is by throwing down condemnation, which is solely truth, legalism, and embracing grace. And says, ma'am, I'm not going to condemn you. I'm not going to stone you. I'm not going to beat you up with truth because that's not what my Father represents. He represents both truth and grace. I want you to know that you're let off, but don't go sinning anymore. He speaks truth still, but he does it in a graceful way. The church really is guilty of holding stones in their hands. The church really is guilty of being so gracious that we never confront problems. Friends, let go of the rocks. Grab hold of truth and grace. Be what Jesus is. Because I could call any one of you up here, and I could put a rock in my hand and say that you're worthy of death. Because the Bible tells me that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So while you're sitting with your neighbor and they begin to talk about their pornography addiction, don't pick up a stone. While you're sitting with that person at work and they're swearing up a storm, don't pick up a stone. While you're hanging out with somebody whose life is completely messed up, don't pick up a stone. Begin to show grace and truth at the same time. Begin to be God. Now, I don't mean God himself. I'm not talking some strange theology, but represent God properly. A God of truth and a God of grace. Because when we stood before him, he said, drop the stones. There's Jeff Hillier, who's as guilty as they come. But he's come to me, and my blood has covered everything. It's covered everything. And by my grace, he's able to stand before people and preach. By my grace, he's able to walk in this world. And by his grace, those who've chosen no longer to live in sin, accepting the truth that sin will push us further away from God, grabbing hold of his grace, we can be who God's called us to be. Grace and truth. We saw Jesus full of grace and truth, representing who God really is. The Word became flesh. He became human to all of us. We've got to be real. He dwelt amongst us. He came into the neighborhood. We've got to sit down and have some conversations, go to some weddings, show up at some block parties where people invite us. We need to dwell where they're at. We need to go to them, not just hope that they'll come here. We've got to go to them. Begin to have conversations with strangers. And when we get to the place where we need to open our mouth and begin to share, we don't pick up rocks and just throw truth. We don't sit back and just have a big hug fest and just show grace. We represent God fully and say he's a God of grace and a God of truth. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes? I know I need to wind this down. I want to get us out of here in just a couple moments. The application of this message has nothing to do with an altar moment. It has to do with you going out and being the representative of Jesus Christ. They need to see God. And they will see God as you dwell in the neighborhood. As you dwell in the neighborhood. You're sitting in this place this morning and you've been beating yourself up because you feel like God's just this God who's just all about truth. He's got rocks in his hands ready to toss them at you because of the life you've lived. And you've not been willing to embrace him because you don't understand who God is. This morning you've heard that God is a God of grace and a God of truth. He holds both at the same time. The very essence of those words come from his being. He initiated the relationship by sending Jesus Christ to die on the cross for you. He didn't wait for you to ask, but he loved you so much that even though he knew what you would do, he sent Jesus. You're in this place, you say, Pastor, I've never given my life to him. I've never, ever committed myself to him. But today I want to be cleansed of all my wrongdoings, and I want a relationship with him. I want to accept him as my Lord. If you're in this place and that's you, would you just raise your hand? I want to give my life to Jesus Christ for the first time today. Just raise your hand. No one's looking around. It's you and me. Is there anybody in this place? I'm not going to wait long. Is there anybody in this place? last chance. God's speaking to you. Just raise your hand.